Today's webinar. My name is Jake Freevald, and I head up product marketing here at Fulcrum. Today, we're going to tackle field operations management and see about those benefits that you see on the screen there. I do need to say at the beginning that we'd love to get your questions on this topic, and if you do have questions or comments, please put them into the questions box. There's a little bit of a bug that doesn't allow the comments box to be used the way that we'd like to, or the chat box. So please just put those into the questions area and you'll get that. Of course, the usual things apply here. We are recording this. You will get an email that has the recording, a link to the recording in it. And you know, we'd love to have any discussion or questions with you after we're all done with the presentation today. So with all that out of the way, let's get started. I'd like to talk about the processes that people are involved in field operations. And as one example of that, I want us to think about a single technician going out to inspect a single transformer on a given afternoon. They are supposed to do an inspection of the, they're supposed to do an inspection of the transformer, and there are certain kinds of preventive maintenance they can do during that that inspection, things like, you know, clearing brush away or whatever might be necessary there. This is being done perhaps on an annual cycle, and we've got a single technician on a single truck to do it. And in this case, the technician finds a cracked bushing, doesn't have necessarily the ability to fix that, and is going to correct it. What happens in that situation? And the answer is a lot. There are a lot of steps in this one single job, and there's actually a lot of systems involved back at the office to manage this job. I counted 4 of them. There may be more or fewer in your environment, and there are, even more importantly, some steps that really have no home in any particular place. So we're going to talk about some of where this all falls together, and when we see the results of that, the fact that the job that this person is doing doesn't have a single place to encompass everything that they do, we're going to see how that changes the way that we have to approach the job, how complicated it makes, and so on. It makes it. So let's consider these 17 different steps, right? Everything from before the trip ever starts, there's got to be a daily vehicle inspection report. I'm not going to walk through all these, don't worry. You know, there are safety checks like tailgate talks. That's part of the job, or should be, not something that is a separate bolt on that you just think about, oh, I got to talk to the safety guy, right? So it's the tailgate talk is a real part of this job. And then there's a number of different things that could happen: nameplate verification, oil and bushings, taking a sample of the oil potentially, other safety steps, locking out and tagging out. You got to do a post-work walk down to make sure you can re-energize, resecure the cabinet, close the workout. That's a lot of stuff. And think about where all of that stuff has to land. The GIS, for example, shows exactly where that pad is. And the technician is going to use the GIS to make sure they get to the right pad, but they may also notice issues. The pad might be in the wrong place. They can see where it's supposed to be on the map, where the map claims that it was put in place, but the as-built never maybe made it right into the map at first, and so it's 20 feet east of where it should be. Well, if that's the case, there are 2 options. The tech can make a note of it and hope that somebody else updates it, or you can give that tech live access to ArcGIS data so they can update it, and if they're not using a good GNSS device, they might not get it right anyway. So should the tech be able to do that to get it corrected? Either way, there's a problem, and there's a way that we have to fix it, but it's not necessarily clear how that fix goes into the GIS. Another system that's involved, of course, is the EAM, which is usually the thing driving the work orders for something like this, right? It knows what the assets are. It knows when they're supposed to be inspected and how they're supposed to be maintained. All of that stuff is good. Closing out the job is definitely going to go through the EAM, because that is the system of record for the person who runs asset management back inside the enterprise, right? Notice that is not the system of record for the people who run the job that we're doing in order to make sure that the EAM person gets what they need out of it, right? But it is the thing that that asset management person needs. And some of the things just don't go in here. The tailgate talk, nope. The daily vehicle inspection report, not interested. And the safety steps, really somebody else's problem. And I say that not being rude. It's something that the asset manager is not responsible for, and really shouldn't be responsible for in a concrete way. It's not their job to manage safety. It's their job to manage assets. Third system, we've been talking about safety. Is there a person responsible for that? Probably the person who is responsible for the tailboard talks, or the chain of custody on the oil sample and how that stuff gets managed. All of that stuff is also important. It's more difficult for that person to get information about the transformer that they're inspecting, or which day and which crew was actually doing this. They may track the samples, they may track the individual location, but it's a little tougher for them to understand exactly what's happening where and how it's related to all of the other issues that are happening. And then there's some things that just fall outside the scope, right? The padlock's missing. Okay, well, we got to know about that. There should be something dealing with the fact that this looks like it's vandalized. The resecuring the cabinet, that's something that should be happening. Is that in the safety system? Is it in the EAM system? Clearing some brush away, seems like that would be something that we want to track, is that there's work that these people are doing, and that work is important work, and how much time are they spending on that work? Some of that basic work might be something that needs to get tracked. Where is it getting tracked? So yeah, and that's not to mention, the DVIR and stuff like that. DVIR, from what I've seen, is very frequently done either on a clipboard or in a spreadsheet, as opposed to being done in some kind of enterprise system that collects that data natively. So there's a ton of stuff going on here. There are at least 3 systems that are involved. In this case, there's a 4th non-system that encompasses everything else, and there's just a lot of stuff to keep track of. And that's why in these situations we see real world scenarios that look more complicated than this fake schematic I've got on the screen. You've got your EAM and your GIS, which we already talked about. There's computer-aided design. That comes up a lot when we're talking about like linear construction and things like that. We've got your safety management system. We've got your customer information system, and that's how you get billed, right? Or someone bills you. If you're a contractor listening right now, that's how you prove to your customer that you've done the things you said you were going to do, and now it's time to pay you, right? And then there's the project management systems that you're working with. So there's a ton of things that I haven't even talked about that are involved in making all this work happen. And there's a bunch of stuff you can see in the individual steps that are here, like the hardware that we've specifically bought. Maybe you do work on manholes, and you've got a 3D camera that you lower into that manhole to figure out, whether the pipes are the right size and all that kind of stuff, whether it's, what the pipe actually matches what is documented in your prior paper-based documents, that sort of thing. You might have GNSS devices, you might have, card readers, or using, on the Internet of Things side, you might be receiving some kind of a signal from a gauge, and you want to make sure that you can capture whatever the latest signal is from that gauge and make sure that it matches what you're seeing there live as well. There's a bunch of stuff that happens, and frankly, where we don't have something in place to handle this now, frequently the gaps are filled in by paper. And this is true even for good organizations that have undergone a lot of digital transformation, right? They've done a huge amount of work to digitize everything they can, but some of those things have been really complicated, and as a result, the fallback is paper, and that's usually the gap filler in those organizations. Some of you may be using paper more than you want to right now, and it's not filling the gap, it's just waiting till you catch up on the digital side. That's fine too, it's really common, but there's a lot of paper out there too. We want to change that so that the field processes happen in one place. Your integrations outside with customers are going to be in one place, penetrating the firewall at one location. Your internal integrations are going to happen in one way, so that you're talking to all the right systems, but you're talking to them consistently in a way that is easily understandable and much more manageable than it would be otherwise. And we want to make sure that you're communicating with your field tech, that hardware that you use specifically for the field. We want to communicate with that in a very consistent way and have it available to every kind of workflow that you'd need to you'd want to use it for, and that would ensure that we are using it to its maximum capability. So what I'd like to do, just to give you a sense of where this is coming from, is I'd like you to think about 4 different workflows that you might use in order to manage your entire set of processes for your entire field organization. And I am going to go way out on a limb here. I'm telling you now, I'm showing you literally pre-alpha software in a minute, but we're going to hope that it works and hope that I don't get in trouble with my bosses for showing it off. I think it's incredibly exciting. Anyway, the point of the pre-alpha software that I'm going to show you, though, is that I want to show different classes of workflow. Very often, people will choose some kind of basic data collection software or use a spreadsheet because something's not very complex, so they don't see the job as really being worth putting into something more sophisticated. Understandable, but I'm going to posit to you that that's wrong, and you'll see why as we go forward. Also, there's going to be a lot of stuff with different documentation requirements. Maybe you need photos or signatures and things like that in some, and maybe not in others. And there may be different kinds of safety involved in those systems too. For example, you might have integrated safety such that it is literally just part of the job, or you might have specific safety apps. So we're going to show you that as well. And that's what that led me to choose these 4 workflows: pad-mounted transformers, daily vehicle inspection reports, a NASCO compliant manhole inspection, and a tailgate talk. Those are the 4 that I'm going to hit on today. And what I'm going to do is start it, and then we'll come back and look what happens at the end. Let me show you what this looks like. Now, I'm showing you, this is the pre-alpha software here. The Fulcrum agent, which may come out with a better name by the time we're done here, is going to give us a set of, is going to build a workflow for me. And let me pull up what I want it to do. And I'm going to explain the prompt that I'm giving you. I'm going to paste it in and then explain it. So first, I want to make a pad-mounted transformer inspection. I'm going to say what models we're using, the series Cooper Power Series 3 pay. I don't even know what this means. Sorry, I am a marketing guy, not a practitioner. I apologize. I want to include a lockout tagout section because this is an area where safety is critically important, and we want to make sure that it's part of the job, not an afterthought. So literally complete the lockout tagout before you can advance on to the next part of the system. And then include instructions for low complexity issues that an inspector can fix on his or her own. Now, I'm going to do one thing here that I need to highlight, and that is this is a demo, and I want the AI to just go as far as it can without asking me stuff, because I'm going to be talking to you, not to it. So in the usual course of events, you would do a lot more discussion with the agent to get exactly what you want out of it. I'm doing this in a way that's going to give us something that works, but is not necessarily as accurate as you would want for your final result. I'm going to come back to these 2 in a second. I need to get another one started up here because I'm also going to do that daily vehicle inspection checklist. This is a bit of a simpler prompt because the idea is a bit simpler. So create the checklist, morning and evening on the same date. This is a demo, same caveat I had before, so it doesn't come back and interrupt me. I'm going to send that. Let's go see if this thing is chewed yet a little bit. This failure, like I said, I know exactly that this is like I said, it's pre-alpha, so I've seen this before. It's going to come back with me to me with a plan. Same with one here. It's going to come back to me with a plan. That's okay. I'll wait for that. Now, you may be saying to yourself, well, what if I use Claude for all my building or some other AI? How do I do that? We do have an MCP, and I'm going to build 2 of my other apps using the MCP. So here's a little bit more of a complex one, and build a Fulcrum app for NASCO compliant manhole inspection, setup and safety, manhole ID, condition, pipes, wrap up. So this is where I may be a little bit more knowledgeable, and I'm giving it more things that I need it to know or want it to do. And media is going to be what that is, and I want it to use choice lists for the field. And I did not say, and need to say, that this is a demo and chug along without me. Now you might ask, why use the Fulcrum agent if I am going to use, if I could use Claude instead? And actually I should go over here to my apps list. This is my apps list from before the demo started. I'm going to refresh it now, see if the app, nope, it has not. Good, so nothing's in there yet. That's cool. Oh, because I haven't told it to build it yet. That's fine. So you'll notice that when I come back to the Fulcrum app agent, it's going to be pushing those apps in there much faster. And in the long run, it's going to have a much more sophisticated set of guardrails on it. Okay, so that's one reason that you would use the Fulcrum agent directly when it is production rather than using Claude right now. However, we do have an MCP. If you know what that is, that means that AI can use Fulcrum in a lot of sophisticated ways. So I'm going to use Claude in that. It's going to take a little bit longer. It has, very Claude-like characteristics, if you know what I mean by that. And we will see how that works out. And then I'm going to create that tailgate talk, right? So this is the 4th one that I'm building on the fly. And when I say I mean AI is going to take care of it for me. Create a tailgate talk checklist for utility crew to use before a task. The crew will be working in New York on vegetation management, so make sure to include any New York State specific requirements. And again, the demo caveat, please don't wait for Jake because he's going to be talking in the meantime. Okay, let's go back and see if the app agent has come back. Needs my attention. It's running Fulcrum setup. I've seen this happen before. Let's see if it comes back. This one worked, no problem. So at a minimum, we'll get one app built out of it. Notice it's telling me to review the app components. Here's the stuff that I think is in it: general information, pre-trip inspection, post-trip inspection, mechanic and supervisor closeout. Here's the actual process. This will be much prettier in the final product, as you can imagine. And then here's the set of fields that I'm talking about doing. I'm going to say, sure, that looks good, approve, and create the app. And what'll be amazing in this is that this is already done now. So I come back over here to apps. This is, if you haven't been in Fulcrum before, by the way, this is where the list of apps is for my environment. And I hit refresh on it, and I've already got my driver vehicle inspection report in there. It's already baked with a lot of stuff in it. I did nothing there. Let's see if it gave me any data events. Nope, not on this one. That's fine because it's more simple. So I've already got one of the things that I was asking for. Cool. The other, oh, yep. This app came back now for the pad mounted transformer inspection. I'm going to approve and create that app as well. And I'm going to come back and see that immediately churn into place. Transformer inspection, cool. So that's done. We'll go back and look at those at the end. These ones, I got to say, are going to take a lot longer. So I'm going to let those bake for a little while before we go back and look at anything. Then we will come back and talk about what we see and why we see it and why it's valuable in the context of all the different things that I'm about to talk to you about, which is, back to the purpose of the presentation, field operations management, what it is, why it matters, and how it makes a massive difference to you and any field organization. So let's start off by defining it. What is field operations management? I'm going to start by noting that a system of every system that you've got, the ones we've talked about, is a system of record of for something. So when you're working in GIS, Esri ArcGIS holds typically the utility network, and that means every component of the network is in place and every component is connected to all the other subcomponents, and you've got a record of the way water flows or electricity flows or whatever it might be. The enterprise asset management system is a record of all of the individual assets that hold that thing up. It's really not the record of the network and how things flow. It's the record of all the individual components. Field service management. Now, here's one I want to spend just a second on, because people hear field operations management. They're like, well, I got a field service management tool. Is that the same thing? And the answer is no, because field service management is really about the customers. There's a reason that Salesforce owns Salesforce Field Service, right? It's because there's a product that somebody bought, and that thing that was bought needs to get maintained or needs to get fixed or something. And that's what this manages. And then there's enterprise health and safety, sorry, environmental health and safety, which includes the record of all the hazards and things that go on. But it's not a record of the process that was going on when that hazard took place, right? It's really not about the process being done. It's about the safety issues in the process that's being done. Not one of those things on its own is a record of the field work. And that's the issue. So there are four things really that are true only in the field, and therefore are necessary for us to have a record of the field work. One is that the work is happening where the systems are not. You are in the field and you're not connected to your GIS necessarily. You are not connected to your EAM, et cetera, et cetera. The record of what you did is the only artifact that comes out of that field work. If you don't have a record of the job, whether it's vegetation management or whether it's asset maintenance, whatever it might be, undergrounding an electrical system, whatever it may be, the record that you collected in the field is the only artifact that matters with respect to the job actually getting done. And the conditions of that job getting done are going to be different from one task to the other, one state to another, one process to another. If I need to explain why it's different maybe from state to state, it could be because there are different environmental requirements in each state, and you've got to manage the environmental requirements a little bit differently. Same thing with safety requirements, same thing with the customer that you're dealing with, et cetera, et cetera. And for all that this is not very well tracked stuff, the consequences of doing it wrong or the consequences of not capturing the complete track are both physical, which means really, really hard to undo, and permanent. You're going to make physical changes in the environment. You're going to pour concrete. You're going to, et cetera, et cetera. And those changes that you're engaged in are going to be permanent. So the field has to manage these things in ways that people in the office really can't comprehend. And what that means is that the field teams are managing something different from what those office people are managing. We are managing not a transaction, not saying, hey, here's a single task with a defined start and a defined end, and there's little pieces that go into it, and that one thing is going to be my unit of work. We don't do that. We do a job that may involve vegetation management across multiple spans of wiring, or that may involve a significant amount of undergrounding with all of the valves and components and pumps that are involved in that. All of those things in that job are not a single unit of work. They are a lot of little units of work that all roll up into something bigger than any individual transaction. And that's a significant change. And again, something even that office-based workers have a hard time understanding how that makes things more complex for people out in the field. So finally, getting to my definition, a field operations management platform is the platform that field organizations use to run, record, and close out their work. And I just want to hit each of those in turn. You have to run the work by giving people in the field the set of things that they need to do. It's your standard operating procedures. Think about it as the how you do what you do. Well, it's the set of verbs you're using in the field, right? So these are the things you pull in your context, you decide how you're going to run the work, and you execute the work according to that plan. That's what running the work means. And that's important because a lot of times we'll talk about inspections, and so, a couple of my examples today are of inspections. Inspections are not the full job. The maintenance is the job, right? The doing is the job. People who do vegetation management aren't thinking of themselves as data collectors. They're thinking of themselves as doers, and they are going to run the job. But what we want to do is we want to turn their actions into some kind of data. And turning actions into data means we can say, this is not only what the plan was, but here's how we executed the plan. Here's what we started with. Here's what we did. Here's when we did it. Here's how we did it. Here's how safely we did it. And now here's the result of that work, the before and after of that work. And then we need to be able to push that information back to all those people who care about it, right? Because the asset management team still needs to know that the preventive maintenance was done. The people who are managing the veg management team need to know that that veg management was done. So there's going to be a bunch of systems that this gets pushed back to. But the recording of the data is just as important as the running of the data. And that's a big change from running things on paper and spreadsheets. And then finally, closing out, if we have the data, but it's really hard to get the data and say to the customer that we're working with, I said I was going to do work, and here's the work that I did, and here's how I did it, and here's the result of what I did, and you have a hard time pushing that back to them, then why should they pay you? Or if you're in a utility yourself and you're saying, this is what I did, but I having a hard time showing the regulator that I actually did it all, why would the regulator believe you? So for things as current as billing, trying to get the billing cycle down as quickly as possible, to be as tight as possible, to the audit that comes 18 months later when you're dealing with this these requirements, and you're able to pull this information together. The field operations management platform has to be able to support both of those things, reducing the time to delivery of the unit of work to your client or regulator, and the ability to handle all of that so that you can get your audits back immediately, rapidly, when the time comes, because there's been an OSHA violation or an audit or any of those kinds of things. And I can talk to you a little bit about this with a company that just published a case study with us, Alpine Energy. They're out of New Zealand, and they have 6 different kinds of workflows that they recently put into Fulcrum, and they've been really excited about how much of a difference it has made to them and how much of a capability to manage the field this has brought to them. And I'm going to start by noting kind of what's in the lower right, the red box. They weren't trying to get rid of ArcGIS. ArcGIS does a different thing than what Fulcrum does, but they were trying to upgrade ArcGIS, and the field capture apps that they had used kind of dropped out from under them. They were no longer able to use those field apps in the same way. So they came to us and said, well, it looks like you do something similar. Can you help us? And the answer is, well, we are not a replacement for something like field maps, because field maps is really, ArcGIS in your hand. But for other, for other field workflows that you're doing, absolutely. And more importantly, we're going to work very nicely with ArcGIS and let it do what it's really good at, and let us do what we're really good at. And that made a major change to how they thought about what they were going to do with their systems. And a similar kind of thing happened with ERP. They were handling defect management inside the ERP, but the field record turned out to be better for that purpose than the ERP record did. So they were able to just convert and say, yeah, you know what? I want the Bible to be what happened in the field, not the Bible to be what's kind of was happening by default in the ERP. You can see some of the different changes. It's mostly for them around time, how much time they spent in the GIS getting ready for a project, which now gets generated instantly. And with the tree asset logging, the amount of on-site work, the productivity of the on-site work. And that's just 2 of their use cases out of several. So there's a lot of work that gets done in a single platform, a single place, a single way, and they're able to then get all the benefits that we just talked about by using Fulcrum in that spot, one field operations management platform in that spot. So what I'd like to do now, and Kurt, if you could open up the poll, I'd like to talk about how many systems one job of yours touches. So if you think about just a routine job that your crews are running yesterday, I'd like to know if, how many systems have more than, how many systems hold a piece of it? There are 3 systems or 5 systems, or maybe you don't know how many systems there are. And each one of those requires you to have a certain number of systems available. Kurt, I am not seeing the poll up. Is that my problem, or is that not coming up right now?
It's up, Jake.
Okay, so I just can't see it. All right. Great. So I'm going to let that go for about another, I don't know, 20, 30 seconds or so. But if you think about a project, maybe it's vegetation management. You think to yourself, okay, well, I'm definitely using my GIS because it's got a combination of the assets themselves, plus the LiDAR data that I use for the risk side of the house, plus, some of the individual substations that I'm working with. Maybe that's one item in it, and then the EAM is the part that holds all the different elements inside that, and then you've also got a safety system. Include in your thinking there how many spreadsheets you might use, or any paper. I didn't include that as a breakdown here because it's too complicated to do that in our system, but think about those kinds of things. Count paper as a system, count for spreadsheets as a system. And if there are things that I'm not thinking about here, I'd love for you to put that into the question box. Remember, I can't see chat, but if you put information on the chat into the question box, we'll be able to see those, and Kurt will funnel those my way. All right, Kurt, if you don't mind, can we close out? And I can't see the results, so I hope it'll pop up to me.
Are you able to see it now, Jake?
I am not. Give me 1 second. Oh, there we go. It's because it's on another system. You're still seeing my slide though, right? All right.
No slide, the poll right now.
Great. So what I'm seeing is about 45% of you are saying that you see 3 or more systems touching the job. You've got the next highest is 5 or more, and about 15% never counted. So if it's only 1 or 2 systems, that's only about 15% of the territory. So it's a significant change. And what I'm going to do is close out that poll and come back to the slides. It's jumping on me. This is hilarious. Hang on 1 second. I'm sure we'll edit this out in post, right, Kurt? That was meant to be funny. It's not, but it was meant to be. All right, I'm almost there, folks. I'll get there, and then I'm going to have to restart the slideshow, and then we'll be back. I'll try to do that better on the next poll. We'll see if it works. All right. So Many of you said 5 or more, 3 or more, never counted. 1 or 2 is actually the lowest measurement that we got on this poll. So the problem that I'm describing is not a false one. I think that's fair to say. And the question is only how big of a problem is it in your particular environment. So let's talk about where field operations management fits. Briefly, what each system is built for is important for us to make sure that we understand what we're not trying to rebuild. I don't want to rebuild anything in field operations management in particular, but GIS is all about where it is. EAM is about the asset register and the PM schedules and so on. Field service management is about getting technicians to customers, and EHS is about an approval system for supervisors really to manage those job hazards. This language is coming not from me, but from the websites of various vendors of these products. So that's what each system you currently have is built for. But let's map that now to the 6 things that crews do. There's more than these, but let's talk about the things that they do. Take just something as simple as, I'm going to go upper right, the as-built. I'm supposed to be doing linear construction. I'm putting in a set of poles and transformers for new construction that's going to light up some houses on a new block. Very cool stuff. There is a plan that comes out of a CAD system saying this is exactly where these different elements go, and here's the specification for the various transformers and other pieces of equipment I'm going to use, and there's a drawing that shows where all these things are. When we actually get on site, we realize that one of those poles has got to be moved a little bit differently because there's a gigantic boulder where I'm supposed to be moving, and it's cheaper to actually move the pole than to move the boulder. So we do something a little bit different, and as a result, the actual process is different from what you actually built is different from what the plan was. You might have different things too, like you might have a transformer that was spec'd in one way and you get something with an equivalent spec but it's a different brand, or a better spec than what was originally asked for. You should really be capturing all of that information. That process that I just described doesn't reduce to an asset or even a set of assets, right? There's more going on there than just the individual asset requirements. There's more in it than any individual work order, more than one appointment, more than one hazard. So there's no, out of the 4 kinds of systems we talked about before, there's no single place to give the as-built from soup to nuts in a single location for the thing that your crew did today. And I think that's true of basically everything that's happening here. In fact, one that gets overlooked sometimes is the quality capture, the quality control step, where you've got somebody following along behind someone else to make sure they did it right. Well, you want to make sure that you're capturing not only the process that the builder used in order to build out what they created, but also the process of QCing it. And those 2 things have to map to the exact same thing. They have to be kind of one-for-one marryable. And that can be very complicated to do if you're not using a field operations management platform to do it. So there's no natural home for these things to live in without a field operations management platform. And that leads to the process of auditing. If you don't have a field operations management platform, then you're assembling these things from all of the different systems that around which the work revolves, right? So you end up with something with a job to try to piecemeal integration work after the fact. If you're a utility, that means that you have a difficult time extracting from the contractor what exactly it is that you paid for, and especially because it takes a long time to do that, potentially weeks or even months. You have to do that before it gets buried rather than after, ideally, and you can't do that because you can't see what they actually did. And if you're the contractor, you want to build that utility and you want to prove to the utility, and by the way, you can actually competitively differentiate yourself by making this really, really easy. You want to be able to prove to the utility that you did what you said you were going to do, and when you said you were going to do it, and to a high level of quality, and you did it in a safe way. So you can provide that to the utility in a consistent, clean way, and you can do it in order to get paid faster, and you can do it when the utility comes back, as they always do, and says, well, what about this? Or the regulator comes back to the utility and the utility has to turn to you and say, hang on, what happened here? This has actually been, on the contractor side, a differentiator for us so much that I had a customer tell me about 3 months ago that they were told originally that they were going to use the utilities system. They were told by the utility, you will use this system to capture the data. And they told the utility, we'll use your system, but we're also going to capture it in Fulcrum because we need what Fulcrum does for us. So they actually did double data entry. And when the utility came back and said, holy cow, there's stuff we didn't capture and it's a real problem, the contractor was able to say, nope, it's all here, take it. And from that moment on, the contractor has always been able to use Fulcrum without using the other system, because it essentially replaced what the utility was dealing with, was coping with, really, at that point in time. So it may sound cheap to say, hey, we're going to use whatever the utility uses, but sometimes it's better to use that field operations management platform anyway, either by convincing the utility that you need to, or by just doing it anyhow and making sure that you reap the benefits regardless. A bad as-built that we talked about just a moment ago becomes a permanent defect. And there's the Common Ground Alliance modeling almost 700,000 incidents talked about $83.2 billion in annual damage to buried utilities. And that comes from everything, like a bad dig where there were lines where they weren't supposed to be, whatever situation you want to think of, it's all there. The record that you build in the field operations management platform becomes not just the record for the project, but also the package, because it really is the package. It's everything associated with that build out. That package becomes the reference data for things like building in the future. Hey, I need help locating this line. Okay, I've located it here. Where did I get that from? I got it from a GNSS device that was on that location on that day. So because it was GNSS, I know that it's within a meter or a centimeter or whatever your requirement is of where it says it is. So now I've got confident information that helps me reduce damage to the buried utility lines that otherwise would be damaged. So that's the value of having that record, not just in the project, but as the basis for all of the work, maintenance or otherwise, that goes forward from there. The repair aspect of this statistic was about $5 billion, like not a huge part of it. The direct repair was not the whole thing. Roughly for every dollar you spend, 16 or more has lost everything downstream of that. And the records themselves are one of the issues around an issue in San Bruno, where they named specifically that the record keeping was part of the problem with the way that they did the job, and therefore the penalty was specifically predicated on the fact that these as-builts were incorrect. So a bad as-built can bite you in a lot of different ways, and we need to ensure that the as-builts are correct, and all of the other, and the as-builts become the permanent record of everything that happened and the data that's used going forward in your system. Another really interesting aspect of this, it reminds me of when people say, do they really use paper? I thought we were all digital. No, we use paper all the time in our industry. And another thing that always surprises people is we don't know where our stuff is. When we talked to a water engineering firm recently, before they were using Fulcrum, they found around 10% of the structures were not in the GIS at all, or no longer existed for one reason or another. And as a result of that, you'd have manhole covers that were paved over. You would have people saying, yeah, the manhole is 50 feet beyond the place where the Hardys used to be. And the amount of local knowledge necessary was horrifying, local knowledge necessary to find the manhole. And so as a result, when they were starting to put things into Fulcrum, they realized they could capture a much larger, much more closer to 100% of the structures that they needed to capture, and have a much better foundation for determining what that record looked like. And they differentiate on that as well for their clients, because it's their clients who really have lost the data. It's not the engineering firm, it's the clients who lost that data. Similar result with an electrical utility contractor, 10% of pillars missing on an inspection round, completely different class of asset, absolutely the same kind of issue with a different, and this was another New Zealand customer. When data capture gets good, two things happen at once. You reduce the data problem. Your data quality goes way up, because quality includes completeness, consistency, the accuracy of the data, all that stuff. All that quality stuff goes up. And at the same time, you also get major productivity improvements. You're not making it harder for people to get good data. You're making it easier for them to do the right thing and capture the right data. And the proof of that includes in a distribution co-op that went from 3 minutes per pole to around 45 seconds, which took them from 300 poles a year to 3,000 to 5,000 poles a year with the same staff. Like, the amount that they could do with the same staff exploded. And that result also helped them close faster, because the digital records were more available, and the things that used to take 2 weeks to a month now close in under a week. So massive change for for one of our customers doing joint use pole inspections. I'd like to run my second and last poll of the day. I'd like you to think about the same job that you thought about a few minutes ago, and I'd like you to think about which part of it costs you the most. And by cost, I mean the issue with that is most difficult for you. It doesn't have to be hard dollars. It can be hard dollars. It can be aggravation. It can be a lot of different things. But look at that same job and say, does it cost me in process consistency? I get the work done, but they don't always do the job the same way. Or data quality. And I want you to think about all three sides of that, right? Completeness, consistency, and accuracy, right? All three of those legs of data quality. There's a fourth, actually, which is timeliness. So you can think about that as a separate leg if you want to in data quality. And then AI readiness. We're going to talk more about AI in just a minute here, but let's talk about AI readiness for a minute. If you don't have good data, how does the AI run on top of the data that you've got? Right? Garbage in, garbage out still applies to AI. In some ways, it applies more because AI is so confident about what it tells you about your garbage data. So is that something that has been problematic for you? And then safety documentation, which is another major requirement, obviously, for any of these jobs. And if they're disconnected, then you're not using integrated safety, then that becomes a major problem. I'm going to key out of my slides before I flip back over to the poll. And what I'm seeing is about 50-50 for process consistency and data quality. So people aren't as concerned about AI readiness yet, and they're not as concerned about safety documentation. That would probably change if you talk to your safety people, but yeah, that's looks like it's pretty similar on process consistency and data quality, maybe with a slight edge for process consistency. I'm going to let this percolate for about another 10 seconds, and then we'll move on to the last part of the presentation, and then we'll go check out what the AI built for us with those workflows that we talked about before. Yeah, so around 50-50 process consistency and data quality. We've had about 10% of people pop in and say AI readiness is a problem that they've got, one of their major headaches. So AI readiness is there, but just not as strong of a player as it was in the past. And with that, I'm going to go back to our slideshow. Got one more major thing to talk about, and that's AI, and then we'll go back and look at what AI built for us. Within the field operations management world, AI really has three jobs to think about. So let's consider them in turn. The first one is thinking about the record. I've got good data. This is what I just mentioned. I've got data, and I need to reason over the data and find patterns so that I can figure out what I need to do next, or I can make better decisions, or whatever it may be. That analysis tends to happen at a desk. It's not something a field worker does. So this is the result of having good field data. It's also, because it's very desk oriented, the focus of what most AI people like to talk about. If you find an AI expert, 9 times out of 10, they're going to talk about stuff that they do for the desk-bound people and not talk about the field at all. And they might tell you a good game about, we could use LiDAR for things. Okay, that's good, but you're not helping people actually gather LiDAR data. You're talking about the results, again, of a process that happens elsewhere. And they're using that LiDAR to do things like assess risk. Great. We've got a partnership with a company called Wolpert. You've probably heard of them. Wolpert is doing a lot of LiDAR-based activities, and that LiDAR data can feed into the people who are working with that risk-based data to decide how they're going to manage their spans. So that decision-making process happens, but it's reasoning over the data from an AI perspective. The second one is AI in the worker's hands. If there's no no place for AI to act, no one place for AI to act, how can you be sure that the AI can help your worker all the time? So the example I'll use here is audio FastFill, which is a Fulcrum capability. You start a process and you talk into Fulcrum, and Fulcrum takes that information and places the data into the slots where it needs to go based on the data type it is. So it's more than voice to text, which is usually something you'd use to fill out a single comment form. This is more like voice to data. So it enables you to simply speak and get all of the data captured as it needs to. Audio FastFill works on any app or workflow that you've got in Fulcrum right now. So you don't have to train it specially to do it. And if you want to create a new workflow, you don't have to do anything special to get Audio FastFill to work on that. compare that to if you've got something in Maximo Mobile and you've got something in your EHS Mobile and you've got all these different places. How do you make sure that the experience is the same for the worker? It's not going to be. So AI needs one place for the worker to have all of the AI effort focused on making that worker's life better, more productive, safer, et cetera, et cetera. And then the third job is in building the tools. And you saw that there's a lot of, you saw that that's one of the things we're going to talk about here. But the important part about building with the tools is not what some developer in IT can do. It's what the people who do the work can do, because the people who do the work understand the work better than anyone in IT ever will. And they'll immediately see a result and be able to say, nope, that's not going to work. Or, yeah, that would be great, but I need to add on some more stuff. That person needs to be able to do that more. And I'm really not talking about having a lineman come in and say, okay, well, I'm going to do the following work, but you want the person who supports the lineman to be able to do that. And you want the lineman to be able to talk to the person who supports them and not have to worry about an IT developer trying to understand what those two are saying, because what those two are saying is probably Greek to the person in IT. In most cases, for the second and third of these, people don't really know where to start on getting AI into the workers' hands. And there's a lot of talk about building the tools, but that talk typically doesn't involve people at the field level, the field and field support level. So almost all of the AI that we deal with is pointed at somebody's desk. If you look, again, this is from a survey of the vendors who are actually doing this kind of work. Your EAM flagship capability in one case reads work orders, inspections, meter readings, and reliability strategies. That's because that's the data they already have. It has not much to do with what the actual field worker is going to be doing. So you have to think about, okay, well, if that's where the AI is applied, how much of the work that my crews did yesterday exists in one of those four forms? GIS, again, AI is making leaps and bounds of progress in GIS. The issue is that it's getting the information from imagery and satellite data and stuff like that, and getting a better understanding of the data that you already have, not getting a better understanding of how the work occurred in the field. Safety is getting better as well. In some ways, they are ensuring that they get stronger, richer data, but safety has honestly often been underfunded. And as a result, and it has too little attention paid to it. And as a result, we get a lower level of expectation for safety. And that's really not doing safety justice. One headline feature is fill in the checklist by hand, photograph it, and let AI read it. And that is terrible, in my opinion. The idea that safety gets such short shrift that you have to do the same fill out you always did, and you're just going to have those checkboxes and your handwritten scrawl be the thing that is going to get the AI feature of the year. That's terrible. It's just not sufficient for integrating safety into a workflow and making it part of the process. Now, none of this is bad software. Like the safety thing bothers me, but that's bad process. It's bad because it's so least common denominator. But it's useful to the people in the office who need the field work done, right? It's not bad software per se. It's just not directed at the field worker. So that's one side of it. The second piece is the answer is only as good as the record that it stands on. So we've seen Gartner in February of 2025. That was a while ago, I understand, but they saw 60% of AI projects abandoned through 2026 because they lacked AI-ready data, right? So the ability to make progress is slowed down by the fact that you don't have good data, and that uncertainty. Do I not know what the answer is? Like, uncertainty is actually in some ways worse than knowing what the answer is, because if you know that 60% of your data is bad or 50% of your data is bad, you're not AI ready, at least you have a place to start. You know what you have to clean up before you begin your AI process. But not knowing, not having a clue how you're going to get from point A to point B, that's incredibly bad. And if you can capture the entire job digitally and not just the individual transactions that happen in it, then that uncertainty starts to go away. The second place is where the gloves are, right? I've got somebody who is using AI in the field. I mentioned audio FastFill. I won't repeat that. There are some things on our roadmap that are not live yet. Photo-based data capture. Take a picture of a nameplate and you get things like, yes, this is 3-phase and it's this many amps and it's this model number and serial number. Awesome. So very fast data capture. And you may say to yourself, how good is AI at reading that serial number? And I will pretty much guarantee you that it's better than a technician typing it in with 2 thumbs. And the second is context-aware sanity checks, right? We're going to say, here's the stuff that we need to know about. It's, you know, the temperature is wrong on this gauge. Oh, well, that's because I'm reading in Celsius, whatever it may be. Being able to understand that the process that you're going through is part of the data capture, but there's a piece that you need to go back and get because you forgot to fill in the blanks on this, and it's important for a future calculation. All that kind of stuff could be part of what AI does to assist the person who's out there trying to be productive in the field. And then the last one is what I want to close out on, which is the team closest to the problem building the workflow. And there's a couple of examples here. I've got 2 API connections, one to Claude and one to Fulcrum. This person built his own tooling app for form creation, and he did it because it just made him that much more productive. It just made him so much faster. The public works example there is honestly, that's not an AI thing. I know I'm talking about AI, but this was a case where there was a wildfire and they needed a FEMA form to be converted into a Fulcrum form, and they did that within about 10 minutes. And the next morning, they had volunteers out in a parking lot learning how to use Fulcrum to go capture data with photos and everything like that to document the wildfire damage. And that's important, of course, because the faster you get your data to FEMA, the faster you get aid. And so that 10 minutes of just building it out in Fulcrum made a huge difference to their ability to respond to wildfire. That's not even AI based. What do you get from AI, applying AI or to a situation like this? One of them is for the person who's building it, you get the speed, which we can think about, right? You're going to see speed in a minute because you'll see what was built without me even looking at it. And completeness. That's the part that you're not going to see as much because I'm not an expert in these kinds of things. But being able to have your AI as a conversational partner to say, well, what about this? Well, I'm working in New York this week, and I was working in Oklahoma last week. What are the safety requirement differences or the environmental differences? What are the changes when I go from one place to another? Let's think about that. Let's think about all the different aspects of this workflow. That completeness is something you're going to get from AI that's going to help you build out the right thing and not just build something fast. And then for whoever owns the platform, and I think this is really critical, you're not building something from scratch. You're not saying to Claude, build me a brand new app. You're building something that includes the look and feel, which means that the field worker is going to be able to, is going to be used to what he or she sees, right? The field worker is going to understand what they see. You get the security apparatus, right? The ability to onboard using SCIM, the ability to sign in using single sign-on, the ability to put people into different groups and make sure that they all have the right permissions. All of that just comes along for the ride, along with things like offline sync, which is hard to do, multimedia handling so that people are used to taking pictures in certain ways, and that's a very consistent thing. And having sync that is proven over almost 3,000 customers doing this for something like 15 years. The ability to build on top of a platform is a huge benefit to the user of Fulcrum. Sorry, there was one more piece, and of course safety gets short shrift because they always do. The point is that we don't want safety to be anything more than part of the job. We don't want it to be its own separate thing. And one of the issues we've got is the measurement with safety. The numbers look really good, but they're based on records that are not complete because people don't capture safety issues the way that they need to be. Vegetation work is where the stakes are highest, and I know I'm blowing through this because I know I'm getting to the top of the hour. One specific issue with safety was not when the problem was safety wasn't getting done, but when the utility was unable to produce records of the safety steps being taken, when the hardware was added to the tower in this case. So 2 months earlier, they had spotted it and classified it and said she needs to be corrected within a year. And afterward, when the crew actually climbed the line, they saw 29 problems that required immediate repair that weren't done. And field operations management, to be very clear, that software would not have prevented the wildfire. I'm not saying that. That's a claim that's way too big for me to make. But it would have answered the question, when, why, by whom. We would have known all of that information. I'm going to skip. Actually, let's do one last thing here. Just notice when I'm talking about multiple problems, inconsistent processes, uneven data, slow AI, and an afterthought, and safety being an afterthought, those are four symptoms of one thing. Those are symptoms that field operations management is being given short shrift. It's being put together piecemeal by other systems rather than having a place you can call its own. So field operations management is the platform that field organizations use to run, record, and close out their work, and that's critically important for the work that we're talking about today, to make sure that you've got all of the benefits that we talked about today. So now let's check the oven. Finally, at long last, we're going to go into the Fulcrum app agent, and actually we already saw a piece of this, right? We saw that it did it, and I could go and edit the app, and I'm not going to do that right now, but it created that app. We'll go look at that. This agent completed it almost instantaneously. Let's see if Claude finished it up. Creating the choice list now, created a bunch of stuff. It tells me what it tested or untested. It tells me Claude codes are a plausible representative sample subset. I understand that. I told it was a demo. That's okay. Because I told it was a demo, it's going to tell me things that are, good for a demo too. It tries to be very helpful. And then the utility crew, tools confirmed, New York State specific content included. I'm going to go see if that happens. And then let's go back to the apps. And I've got the two that were created by the Fulcrum agent almost immediately. Remember, folks, that is pre-alpha software. And then we've got the Claude does this sometimes. It's like, hey, I'm trying to check something out here. I'm going to put this app in here, but I can't delete anything without your permission. So I made it, but I can't delete it. That's okay. Here's the manhole inspection and the tailgate talk that we talked about. Let's go look at that manhole inspection first. Again, you can see the set of things that are in here that it just thought to do. It's capturing the inspector name. Notice the little red here. It made decisions about what needs to be mandatory and what may not need to be mandatory. Atmospheric readings taken at grade, et cetera, et cetera. It decided to give the ability to scan an asset tag for a barcode. It's collecting an address, which can be taken from your GPS. It created multiple different sections to talk about what each of these would be. All of the various elements you've got. Let's go take a look at the cone conduction grade. It used a choice list here and created that choice list. And the choice list, if I go to choice list, that was NASCO, right? Probably have way too many. Yeah, let's filter on NASCO. Here's the condition grade 5 choices it gave me. So it created this choice list without me specifically saying, go create me a choice list, right? It just gave me the choice list based on what it thought I needed to do. It'll do that for classification sets, etc. Let's go back into the app. See if there's anything else that's special down here. Inspector signature. So good stuff there. Let's go back and check the DVIR, which is probably, remember that's a daily vehicle, a driver vehicle inspection report. That's probably going to be a little bit simpler, but not going to be nothing either, right? So here's the date. It chose, again, what's mandatory. It uses check boxes here because this should be really simple, right? Windshield wipers and fluid is a checkbox, piece of cake. It told me to take pre-trip photos. It gets the certification date. So again, a much simpler thing, but simpler on purpose because that's the nature of the app. And we've got 2 minutes left, so I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I will take questions now, and I will stay on the line a little bit over the hour to make sure that anybody who has questions can get them answered. And let me stop sharing. And go to questions. Okay, somebody said the demo was too difficult to follow. It was moving too fast for me to understand the process. The instructions to use the AI is the instructions to use AI anywhere on the Fulcrum website. Sorry about the speed of it. The point was only to show that we have that we're plugging a prompt into an AI and getting fully baked software out of it, fully baked Fulcrum apps out of it. Please contact us to discuss what it would look like for the use cases you're looking at. One more question. How is field operations management different from what you've done in the past? That is a, interesting question. Fulcrum's heritage is field-oriented, GIS-focused data capture. And field operations management is the natural outcome of how much work we've done over time that involves more than simple data collection. It involves, again, all 3 phases, right? Run, report, and close out. So it involves running more jobs than you would think of as data collection. We've had more and more people talk to us about everything from vegetation management to linear construction. And when you have requirements running that far, along with preventive maintenance and other things that are not strictly data collection, things where people don't feel like their job is data collection. When you have that much work to be captured, it's no longer about data collection. So all we're doing is reflecting the difference between what people used to call us and the way that the industry talks about data collection, and making it big enough to hold all of the different kinds of things that we do. So if you've known Fulcrum for the past 6 months and you've just gotten to know us during that time, then a lot of what we do here may not look very different from the way that you think about us now. If you look at if you've been with Fulcrum for 5 years or 6 or 7 years and you think about us as the data collection company, it's a radically different change from what you probably originally thought of us as. I'm going to move to, it looks like actually the other questions are all of relatively straightforward type, so I'm going to stop there. And if there are any further questions, I'd like you to reach out to us. There's a ton of things that we'd love to talk to you about, including the kinds of use cases you're dealing with now, how you might expand the use of Fulcrum within your organization, or if you're not using Fulcrum, how you can apply the field operations management principles we talked about today to cover more of your fieldwork bases. And with that in mind, though, we're at the top of the hour, and I will sign off. Thank you for being with us today. You had other things you could have done, and you were here instead, so I appreciate that very much. And we'll see you on the next go-around. Thanks.